General Reimer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission, I want to start off, first of all, by saying it's an honor to be here and to appear before this Commission to share some thoughts on this critical issue. And I thank each of you individually for your distinguished service to our nation and collectively for once again answering the call to take on a critical challenge. I firmly believe that America faces the most serious external threat to our homeland since 1812. I believe that it's important that we recognize this and recognize also that although a national concept of operation is being developed, it is far from understood and implemented. The freedoms that make this country great, freedom of movement, rights to privacy, and others, also make it more challenging to defend our people and protect our property. I think we must think about this anew and figure out how we go about approaching this in a different manner. I believe the foundation of this new effort is partnership. There has to be a partnership amongst the federal, state, and local level to the extent that it does not exist now. There has to be a partnership amongst the civilian first responders, emergency responders, and the military to the extent that does not exist now. And of course, the subject you are addressing, private and public sector partnership, is absolutely critical in this particular area. And so let me focus a few remarks on that last partnership. I believe that this is more of a cultural challenge than a technological challenge. The military has considerable experience in protecting critical assets, and as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, in your opening remarks, 85% of those assets belong to the private sector. We know how to apply techniques to protect those assets. It's a matter of making up our mind to do it. We're not starting with a clean sheet of paper. We must recognize that PDD 63 and HSPD 5 represent the basis of an initial effort, but they need to be refined and meshed. Information sharing is absolutely key to our efforts in this area. If we want to prevent attacks like 9/11, we must have proper intelligence, but as everybody here knows, domestic intelligence is tricky business. If we want to maximize the return on our investment, we must be able to share honest information on lessons learned from previous incidents and exercises in both the public and private sector. There are a number of obstacles associated with this information sharing. Handling of classified information does not move smoothly. There are liability issues associated with committing mistakes in training exercises. There's a protection of sensitive information that may assist potential terrorists themselves if we make too much of that public. And finally, there's a disclosure of competitive information in the private sector that bothers many of the private companies. We've made some progress in each of these areas, and we should leverage this progress. I think the information sharing and analysis centers that are set up seems to me to be a step in the right direction. They're not robust enough now, and we need to figure out how to make them more robust. I think the partnership program that was highlighted here between the state of New Jersey and the Business Executive for National Security is probably as good as I've seen, and it needs to serve as a pilot program for all of the states. And from a broader perspective, I think there are a lot of good efforts going on around the country, and I think we have to pull them together. The organization that I represent, the National Memorial Institute for Prevention of Terrorism, has been in this business for some time. We actually came out of the Mirror Building bombing in 1995. And our charter is to really do everything we can to prevent what happened in Oklahoma City from happening again. We are supported by the family members and survivors there in Oklahoma, and I can assure you that that charter is very meaningful to us. One of the first things we did is to try to get organized and pull together the emergency responder community. We recognized as we traveled around the country and visited first responders and emergency responders that there were pockets of excellence. And if we could share that information on the good practices that were occurring, that everybody would have a model. And we felt by doing that, we would also be able to get into an honest exchange of information on accurate lessons learned that were taking place. The nation cannot afford to have everybody go through every training exercise. So we have to share information concerning these training exercises, and that's what we've been primarily doing. Congress has supported us with 4 different appropriations, and we've mainly focused those on science and technology that we think the first responder community needs. But we've also been involved in a number of exercises like Dark Winter and Silent Vector that have helped educate us and form our opinions about what needs to be done in this partnership role that I mentioned. I think there are a lot of issues to be addressed. They're not easy, but they're solvable, and every one of them is critical. The fundamental issue, however, is how do we provide security for our citizens while still protecting the individual rights and liberties that have made this nation great? How do we continue to have a free movement of goods and people while making sure that we know that those goods and people are not intent upon destroying us? Definitely there is a productivity issue associated with defending the homeland. Just-in-time logistics is dependent upon free access and free movement. But it's more than a productivity issue. What we're talking about, I think, was highlighted by the panel before us. This is a moral issue. While we can never provide a risk-free environment to all of our people, we must do everything possible to reduce that risk. Really, when you stop and think about it, the first responders were the people the previous panel talked about. They're people just like you and me. They're those who were caught in the impact zone of the Murrah building bombing, the World Trade Center, and the Pentagon. We need to do everything we can to protect them. And experience has shown us that without a plan to protect our people, both in the public and private sector, we will lose too many. We must organize and strengthen the public and private sector efforts to ensure we do everything possible to take care of those wonderful people. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and I look forward to answering any questions you might have.